So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to TinyTechGuides Talks. I'm here with Yves Mulkers, who is the author of Generative AI Business Applications. I was actually fortunate to co-author this with Yves earlier this year. It came out. Yves, I recall it was like a #1 new release on Amazon, so that was amazing.
Yeah, really was really surprised. It was on top of my mind. Yeah, you need to write a book, and it's kind of good for marketing type of thing. And I'm not the best writer as such, but it was on my wish list to get that going. And you said, okay, are you into writing a book? I thought, no. Okay, let's go. This is a time that we can do it. And of course, with the help of a little bit of generative AI for doing the research, we managed to do that, and with some good coaching from your end, I think, yeah, that's the main thing. But I think your question as well is of how did you come about writing that book? Generative AI was hyped with ChatGPT, but we felt like make it more tangible, make it more useful for business, because tech is just tech, and it's not bringing the real value for businesses. And that was the main driver of writing the book.
Yeah, it was funny. We started out, we wanted to write a 20-page report, and next thing we know, we got a 130-page book out of it. So, but you have an interesting background, Yves. I saw on your LinkedIn profile, it says, let me get this right. I turned data pains into business gains. I love that. So I just love to hear maybe a little bit about your origin story and how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's started very few passions that led from one passion to the other. And I really have to start when I was about 15, 16 years. I was so passionate about DJs coming up and beat mixing. So that was really the stuff where I was fancied. These were the days we still have clubs here in Belgium. In every city, we had 3 clubs. So we had a real nightlife. Everybody was going out. So you could enjoy the music and really go out for 4 days a week without any problem. But I was so intrigued by the beat mixing, how these guys did it. And this is the days that you still had to buy vinyls. So
right.
I felt like, hey, this is something I want to do. I really love it, what these guys are doing, playing with the audience and so on and so forth. So I started collecting vinyls at those days to have that collection, because otherwise you couldn't be a DJ. And then I bought me as well the technical material, 2 vinyl players and a mixing board.
Sure.
So for my first holiday job, I bought these ones. So I still have them in the basements. These are the Technics SLM-K 1210 Black Edition. So for me, it's kind of, hey, this is with my first holiday job I ever bought this setup, and I started playing around and mixing. But the collection grew over a few thousand maxi vinyls and singles.
Holy moly.
And albums. So, in the beginning, I was typing this in my Commodore 64. So that was the other passion that came along, the Commodore 64 in BASIC, the listings, and we could sort it. So already easy you have a number on the disk and you could find that back. But all of a sudden, it was too small, the Commodore 64. I had to put it on 3 floppy disks. So it was not really manageable. So in my head, it was like, I had the epiphany already, like, hey, this would be nice if the music would be on the computer as well, because it evolves from the Commodore 64 to the XT. So I had that vision already back in those days, but it didn't happen. I understood later on that they still had to invent the MP3 and the compression algorithms before we came to that. So at that time, the Commodore 64, I thought it was a manual, but I taught myself to program in BASIC. So that's what I've learned afterwards. And with the XT, the first personal computer, I was able to have a database system. And I developed my own database system to organize my own collection of vinyls. So that's the passion. I was passionate by technology and by music. And from the passion for music, the passion for technology evolved, and I learned myself to program. And this is how I stumbled into IT. Well, I had an education in chemistry. I did for 6 years. I worked in operational environments, so I was interested in optimizing those processes. because you see things are not working out. And I had that technical savvy thing working with a PC, and was fortunate enough to have a laptop on my first ever job as well. So I could program in Excel the most crazy things. Well, those days it was still Lotus 1, 2, 3, and was able to automate already a lot of the things we were doing in those days. And finally I thought, okay, operational stuff is all production is going away in Belgium, so I didn't see any career opportunities in there. And I thought, IT, there's still a lot of work. Let's step into that side. So that's where, back in the end of the 90s, I think I stepped into the IT environment, the more technical part, but felt like, yeah, we're developing the stuff and it's fun, and the new features and programs, and it's nice, but I always wanted to talk to the people that didn't have the technical understanding, and help them with the technical solution to build business solutions. And that's how it evolved. And the rest is the rest of the career path on just balancing between technology and business, and trying to weave in a lot of music all the time.
That's an amazing origin story. I wish I had known about the the music piece of it. Maybe we get some intro music to that. If I go find that Commodore 64. But coming back to the book, here, why did why did you consider writing a book? And how do you think it's different from other? There's a lot of AI books out there. We did a lot of research, and a lot of them are written by AI. You can tell, but how does this stand out? And what sort of was the impetus to write it?
Yeah, I think mostly the books are pretty well into what is AI, what is generative AI. Either it's high level, pretty high level. Or either you go the other way, too technical, into the technical part, into really the solutions, the algorithms and stuff like that, but not in a really practical way of what it is. And the book, we wrote it with a lot of examples across industries and departments, which helps no matter in which part of the business you are. You have a good guidance with the book on understanding what is generative AI capable of doing, just for an inspirational part of it. And I always compare it, I'm playing a lot with ChatGPT,
Sure.
Claude, and other large language models. And if I always play it with, give me a data strategy, because somebody says, what will you answer when I ask you for a data strategy? So I thought, let's ask it at the large language models. And I get that fluffy, high level type of answer, which is not practical. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get started and all of that. And with the examples, then I informed it to work with examples and actionable things. And this is exactly what we put in the book. Discuss about the history of generative AI. We talk about the departments and the various industries, and give a lot of examples of companies that already implemented generative AI in their business, and what was the outcome. So not only for, yes, they tried it and, well, it's fine, it's on the shelf. No, they actually implemented it, and this was the gain, what they achieved by implementing generative AI in the business. And then towards the end, of course, we take a lot of interest and focus on the risk and compliancy part, and how to get started with a lot of the TinyTech guide templates as well.
Yeah, it's evolved quite a bit. I remember when we started this book, it was 2023, I believe, and everything was like the art of the possible with AI. You could do this and you could do that. So I'm pretty proud that I think last count we had over 70 different real life examples and case studies in the book. Yeah. And to your point, no matter where you are on the journey, there's something for everybody there. Given that AI is evolving, so rapidly, where do you think it's headed? We have, it can generate music and video now with it looks amazing. Where do you see it headed, and maybe particularly slanting it towards businesses? Are we scratching the surface? Where do you think we are in sort of this maturity arc of Gen AI for businesses?
We're over the hype of generative AI and AI in a certain way. Well, generative AI brought a lot of more focus again onto AI, because it exists since the 60s, the algorithms and rule-based AI. Now, generative AI is a bit smarter in a certain way, where it can learn from patterns in the past. That's the biggest difference. And we're just scratching the surface. I see that we kind of arrived in a stable state with generative AI. You can deploy it, you can use it, it's acceptable on what it brings out, but it still needs a lot of guidance to get where you want to get it to. I'm using a lot of the large language models to help me on programming as well. And sometimes it drifts off and then I say, hey, you forgot about this. So that's where you still need to give it a lot of guidance. For image generation, for example, yes, it's fun. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's a male or a female on an image you post on LinkedIn. So you're quite happy with the creative part. You don't have to spend 2-3 hours on designing whatever.
Sure.
It's just for another purpose. So depending on how you use it, I think the quality definitely is acceptable, and you see the power that is in there if you can bring the contextualization as well. Well, during the last 2 years, a lot of people learn about all the issues we're facing with memory, with caching, performance, costs, and everything like that. So you see a lot of solutions coming up now that tackle these type of problems. So I think that's the next wave where we stabilize the technology, are becoming able to scale it in a different way. So this is the feeling I get where we are and where we are going.
Sure, certainly lots of potential. You know, the latest term du jour, everybody's talking about AI agents and having many AI agents, and you know, at some point we're gonna have Nirvana. I think they keep telling us that, and then the tech world, I'm still waiting for it though. But in doing research for the book, Yves, you know, what sort of surprised you in sort of what use cases, were there surprising use cases you're like, hey, I didn't know could be used for this, or you know, any compelling examples that you know surfaced?
Yeah, one of the examples was Singapore, that is using generative AI as a human co-pilot. It helps, especially in automating the mundane and tasks and augmenting the human intelligence. It's really augmenting part which strikes me. Whereas mostly you're either using it for creating articles, blog posts, your marketing campaigns, generating fancy images, sometimes cutting up the video edits.
Sure.
That's why you typically use it. So it's really a spot solution where these solutions are used. But really applying it in a business context, that's still a harder part. And I think if you look at it where I compare it to, you do a process manually, you understand the process, the various steps as well, and then you start to automate it. When I was doing a project at McKinsey, they told me as well, first try to understand the project, the process, do it manually, and if you understand it correctly, then you can start looking into automating. Typically, what we do as an ITer, we start coding already. And don't think about the problem.
That's right.
Don't think about the way of implementing. So take a few steps back, try to understand what you're trying to solve in such a way. And I think this is exactly where we are with generative AI as well, on thinking what type of problem are you trying to solve and how will we solve that. So defining the business use case and what you want to get out of this helps you on building these type of solutions. And now it was more generative AI as proving the technology.
Sure. That's quite interesting to me. And you know, you mentioned earlier, you touched upon this, but there's a lot that people need to think through, you know, regarding ethics or AI guardrails or responsible AI. What are some of the, you know, the risk, and you know, what do people need to really think about when they're implementing these things? You know, I've seen examples where a consumer was on a car website and they got the car website to negotiate the sale of the car to $1. That's what the chatbot said. Hey, let's discount it to for $1. Or you go to the Chevy website and it offers you a Ford. And so that's sort of an innocuous example, but what should companies be worried about, and how should they think about it?
I think we have to even be more careful than compared to cloud solutions for database solutions. It's a database, it's in a repository, it's in that database, it can be hacked and people can have access to your data. But now with the large language models, we don't know what they do with our data. So it's less obvious and less transparent. Are they using our data, what we upload, to retrain other models? I'm quite sure, and I'm pretty convinced that all the prompts I'm typing in ChatGPT are used to train their models. So I'm kind of beta tester paying for the platform to optimize their large language models. That's the feeling I get. So therefore, you have to be very careful on what you bring in there and how you frame these questions if you're using public cognitive APIs. So that's a thing to be very careful of. It's okay, credit card, ChatGPT, bam, upload a PDF, some very secure information when you upload, and where does it blend? Where we don't know. So I thought of, and there was a case where somebody saw the information they've put on ChatGPT getting back in an answer. And I recently stumbled upon the same issue for myself. There was not any private information or so. I thought, hey, this is exactly what happened in that typical use case. So yeah, be pretty careful of doing that. And just yesterday, somebody was telling me, I saw a tweet from that lady, and she explained, I'm trying to hack the large language models, but mostly to understand how they work and operate. I thought, hey, that's smart. And she has various techniques on how to hack these large language models. So it's a video I need to rewatch to, well, it intrigues me to how can you do that to understand the model, not to abuse the model, but definitely understand, because that helps you on better prompting and understanding what are the risks and where you need to be careful of doing working with the models.
Absolutely. I think organizations really need to pay close attention to that. I'm fortunate, at where I work today, I have the enterprise version, and they say it's not used to train the models and et cetera. On the consumer side, on mine, I've turned that off. Now, the question is, do I trust them? You always find out, hey, oh, by the way, they're actually using your data, even though you turned it off, a year or two from now. So I would encourage everybody, just be very careful what you upload in there. If you don't want it to show up on the internet, maybe it shouldn't go into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you're using, because I don't know if I totally trust big tech. There's so many examples where they said they're doing one thing and another thing happens.
Yeah, you see that. I mean, if you look at ChatGPT, they say we only save your files for 24 hours and then they get away. So yeah, maybe you delete them, but they're still in the backup of the day before. I don't know how that works. So I had the idea of taking all my blog posts and putting that in ChatGPT, and maybe it gets me some SEO or more traffic onto the website. So could be a use case to test out and see what comes out of that. So massively, everybody clicking on that type of information because it's used into the large language models. So you never know, in 3 years when they retrain the model.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned your origin story that you started out doing music and the Commodore 64, and you've put extensive research into this book. For executives who are skeptical about implementing generative AI, sort of what advice would you give them, both from your practical experience and using it to run your business, as well as the research for the book?
Well, it's always kind of, don't be hold back by fear in a certain way, because that means you start procrastinate, you're not going forward, you're not innovating. But if you do that in a very isolated environment, you can run these large language models on a private server as well in a local context, and there you can experiment more with sensitive data in a certain way. But otherwise, just look at the most practical ways of using generative AI in your business and try to work with that. I had an example working with a client where we used the label tags on the gear machines with the serial numbers. So they took a photo and then had that analyzed by generative AI to say, oh, this is the serial number, this is the production date, this is this type of machine, and this is the location, because they attached it to the phone with the GPS coordinates. So simple, it looks like a simple solution, but that's already a lot, very powerful. If they had to do the inventory manually, it took them 3 days with 4 people. Now they do that with 2 people in 4 hours. So that's an enormous gain, not only on cost and labor cost, but as well that you say we can maintain our asset register up to date with all the information what we have. So it's bringing other opportunities thanks to using generative AI in a simple solution. And I think if we do that just in very isolated type of solutions to augment what we do as a human, this is the situation or the status where we are, that we can get at this time the best benefits of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people forget, these models really started with computer vision, that if you look at the history of them, and taking a picture of the serial number is quite interesting. And I wrote a blog post about analyzing my garden yield. And if it can decipher my handwriting, which is very hard to read, it's messy, it's very good at things like that. So I guess the other thing I'd like to ask you is, what are the biggest misconceptions or myths about generative AI that you think people should be aware of? It's a myth. It's not real.
Well, we think it's very smart, but yeah, intelligence is a pretty fake concept, and we're still, as a human being, trying to sort out what intelligence is. These large language models have a lot of knowledge in there, and they're very fast on finding that knowledge, bringing it together, but they're still hallucinating. So that's still a big risk of using the large language models. So I think that's a bit the challenge that we're still facing right now with generative AI, and where it has been promised that generative AI is the solution for everything. It will automate your customer journey on your website. It's a perfect data analyst. It's creating marvelous songs. No, we're not yet there. And sometimes you have to take a few steps back and say, we don't need generative AI, but AI is already enough for pattern recognition. That's already pretty stable, pretty damn good. So understand of which tools that you are using to do what. So I think there the book helps us a lot as well of explaining what generative AI is, what capabilities it has, and how it can help your business. So yeah, not everything is, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So take that in mind and look at generative AI, not to apply it to everything. I'm applying it to a lot of things, but it's mostly because I'm doing a lot of research to understand how good it is and how you can use it, and see if it can help me in automating a lot of the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, that's a perfect quote. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think people need to your point, they need to understand how they work, because you can quickly slide into mediocrity. If you want the average answer, use one prompt for whatever service you want, and you'll get a mediocre answer out of that. So I would always encourage people to experiment with what they're doing. Have you found that prompts are, if you tried fine tuning, or is prompt engineering enough for the applications you've worked on?
More or less. Big advantage that we have now is that the token window, so the amount of words and characters that you can put as an input prompt largely evolved over the last 2 years. So that's a big advantage, that you can put a lot of context within the prompts. There are different ways where you can upload these files to, for example, a ChatGPT with the API, and have that as a context instead of providing that in the prompt. That's a technical solution. But what we see, and by speaking to a few other people that are developing solutions like a Nas.ai or a Trust Graph, what they are doing, they're building on top of the large language models a knowledge graph and a queue system where they can take in the information, your PDFs, your emails, whatever content you want to bring, and they extract the entities from that. So they built the knowledge graph on top of the large language models, which is better in contextualizing the large language models and giving you offers. With NAS AI, we're testing out as well. We did some interviews. They took my LinkedIn profile and created a taxonomy of who I am. And they're putting that on top of the large language models.
Wow.
And now I'm testing to see of how good is my personal assistant, which is more like me because it knows my wording, my passions, the things that I'm using the most of the time when I'm speaking, when I'm writing, and see if the outcome of that personalized assistant is better than I put the same prompt in a ChatGPT, for example. So there are various solutions coming up on how you can optimize that. And most of the people working with the knowledge graphs and the taxonomies on top of the large language model set, we learned that this is the best way of contextualizing the large language models instead of just purely regification on top of a large language model, because that's not enough to bring the context to the large language models. So I think the next 2 years, a lot of investment will be done in building taxonomies, ontologies, and putting that in knowledge graphs and combining that with the large language models. I told you, Nas.ai is a few of these guys, Trust Graph, Progress Software, MarkLogic, formerly. They're all looking at these type of solutions. And when I'm talking to the technical people, I believe, yes, they're going the right way of putting these type of solutions in place with the knowledge graphs, ontologies, and taxonomies. But if I look at it, it's kind of what we already did back in the days with data modeling and trying to understand what is the conceptual model, the important entities for the organization. And I see this is in a certain way the same approach as they're doing with taxonomies and ontologies.
Yeah, absolutely. It always comes down to the data because they don't know really anything about your unique context. So being able to apply that context is extremely important. So I think with that, Yves, we're going to just these rapid fire, just fun questions. I'd like to ask you. So we got three. The first one is, if generative AI could create new hybrid food dishes, what sort of bizarre culinary fusion would you want it to invent?
Well, bizarre. I thought let's put the two things together that I'm really fond of. It's chocolate and spaghetti, so it will be a chocolate spaghetti or a spaghetti with a chocolate sauce, if it can be very creative. But it's two things that I like as food. So yeah.
All right, chocolate spaghetti. I love it. Okay, next question. You get to create your own AI-powered superhero sidekick using Gen AI. What silly superpowers would your sidekick have?
Oh, there need to be a silly superpowers. I thought of time travel would be sometimes interesting to move back and forth in time, to look at things, not to change things, but to look at things or give younger self, some advice as well. That's something. Sometimes a mind reader would be very helpful. I know you can read a lot of body language, but mind reading would be helpful. And I think about where are we with this world, with all the amazing technology that we have, but we're still in a bad situation. So I thought, let's invent superpowers where we can melt weapons into nice chocolate toffees. So maybe there is some less war on this planet, and we have less problems of people shooting each other all over the place.
I love that little aperitif for the chocolate spaghetti, for sure. Last question. How about a silly jingle or rap, since your background, you just opened this with music using generative AI, incorporating as many puns or word plays as you can.
Yeah, I think it cheated a bit on this one.
You have to with this question.
Because I thought, okay, building a rhyme, and I'm not really a rapper, so let's go to my generative AI assistant. And I had to convince the assistant, because it says, yeah, normally you're pretty formal and professional in your communication, so it's going to be hard. So I explained it. It's for a podcast, so it helped me. And I've got this out of the generative AI based upon my background. AI, oh my, let's generate some fun with algorithms humming. Our work's nearly done. We're promptly improving, no need to refrain. This tech's not just fluff, it's got a real brain. Neural networks sparking, creativity's lit. Our outputs are sharp, they've got plenty of bit. from text to images, we're pixel perfect. This AI revolution, we totally GPT it. So let's compute the tune and database our sound. With machine learning beats, we'll remix bound. In this digital age, we're all interlinked. Our AI future's bright, don't you think?
I love that, Yves. And with that, thank you. You're a poet and you don't know it. So I appreciate you on the podcast. Congrats on the success of the book. And, I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you, David.
All right. Cheers.